Yes.
So, Scarlett has been working as a media trainer for a long time, previously a journalist, and has trained lots of different people, including several sort of high-profile politicians. And also was one of the first people who gave me some media training. I remember a few years ago I had a TV interview and I was extremely nervous, and Scarlett kindly helped me out. So really the idea was to sort of share some of her experience that can perhaps be used within the interdependence movement, because as you've just been saying, you know, engaging, well, the media and people in general is pretty key. So I'll hand back over to you.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Okay, yes. Yeah, I've done 4 out of the last 5 Labour leaders, quite a lot of the shadow cabinet. So that's what you need to think about when you're thinking about how to do it, is first you get your objective, then your strategy, and then your tactics. And you need to work out the difference between them, because tactics have to be very flexible. I mean, you do, tactics is what works, right? And what works at the time. I mean, because you're all very young, I started working with Harriet Harman after she got sacked in 1998. And I said, the first thing you have to do is shut up, right? We don't want to hear anything about you. I don't want you on any radio. I don't want you on any TV. You are to give no interviews. You are to go away and do some work. Okay. And then about 3 or 4 months later, Any Questions said, you know, will you do it? And Harriet said, well, of course I won't, because that's what... And I said, no, Harriet, it's a tactic, right? Of course you can go on Any Questions. That's a way to come back. That's a way of them asking you. And actually, it was the beginning of her comeback. So tactics change. But first of all, what I want is how to... we're going to have to... Where is the... Oh, here. First of all, I want you to think about how to get media attention, because that is not easy. So what is it? What are the media interested in? What makes a news story?
Selling.
What?
Selling newspaper.
Yeah, but what makes a news story? What goes into, what makes me think, oh, that would be an interesting story? That's a story that I could write. Think of...
human interest.
Okay, absolutely. One of the absolute keys is people. Hold on. And so that's why when you talk about emissions, what's emissions? When you talk about emissions killing people, when you talk about a child who died of asthma because she lived near a main road in South London, that becomes a story. And that is one of the reasons why, I mean, that if you talk about the climate as weather, you know, well, we're sort of interested, but if you talk about the climate in terms of people, right, and why, so you have to see everything in terms of how it affects people. And obviously, in Britain, the sort of people makes an enormous amount of difference. We are most interested in British people, right? So if there is something happening abroad, it's how many British people died. There was a terrorist incident in Tunisia yesterday, I think, which somebody who goes there a lot, I was quite worried about. I mean, it was on Channel 4 News for about a minute. That was it. No Brits involved, not interested in Tunisia. So people are important. What else?
Just like framing whatever it is as an exceptional circumstance. It's like a perversion from what's normal, what's natural.
Yeah. If you read a newspaper, it tells you what isn't normal, right? So if you want to know, I mean, it's interesting because all journalists, whenever they go abroad, they pick up a newspaper to find out what it's like. But actually, you find out what's not normal. So it is. It's. You're absolutely right. It's not normal, because otherwise, people go, oh, but that happens all the time.
So that's what I feel like there's the split between the Daily Mail and the Guardian, for example. They'll talk about the same thing, But they'll say, no, inequality is natural, and the other side will say inequality is unnatural. So it's a lot of time, I guess, in terms of PR, it's just saying, well, this is just part of, they're saying the science debate. It's like, no, this is normal earthly occurrences. And then you say, the other side say, no, this isn't normal, it's an exceptional circumstance, how we must react to it. So,
Yeah. I mean, it is, and that's, then you have to bring people into it. Okay, what else?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, think of the news story. So what does, give me the news story that uses fear.
Like I suppose anything negative which is written as though it has a potential for escalation.
Give me the news story.
that caravan of immigrants.
Yeah, well, let's hear it.
Okay.
Which is like it's going to get worse and worse.
Okay, I mean, you're right, but you need to think about it in specifics, right? So, violence is absolutely, which is what.
If that pen's no good, there's a green one just
I
below.
know, I don't think it's a lot better. Okay. I mean, you can't see it. So there's violence. But violence is really about crime, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Okay? That we see violence in terms of crime. I mean, you know, you have whole crime correspondence. And what we're interested in is how bad the crime is or how unusual. I mean, normally it's how many, you know, if you think of a terrorist incident, it's how many people died, right? I mean, had that mosque in Christchurch had only one person died in New Zealand, I mean, we would have vaguely heard about it. In America, there are, I mean, nearly every day there are mass killings. So frankly, we have to have an awful lot of them, or they have to be in a school or something like that for us to take it, for us to notice. But in, I mean, if, you know, I mean, most people who get killed in Britain is, I mean, we do it. I mean, it's slightly that if you are a young man, apart from what's interesting about the knife crime, if you're a young man in Britain and you get killed, you're not as important to somebody like me, who is a woman, a mother. But being a woman is really important. Not most women are killed by their partners or ex-partners. For a woman to be killed on the street is unusual, whereas for a man to be killed in gang violence is not. So we're back to the usual thing. I mean, when I was working for a TV station in Birmingham, somebody rang me up on the Monday about a young man who'd been killed the night before, and I went, oh really, on the Saturday night? And they said, oh, it happens every time. I mean, we're not interested in young men. We are in London at the moment because, and that's what it is that we are now obsessed with knife crime in London, with young men dying on the streets of London, and it has it's become a bigger and bigger news story. And that's what you want to do with climate change, right? Is you want climate change to be something that people, and it's about, and it's beginning to be there, but you have to make it, you have to keep it up there on the agenda. Yes?
Yeah, I was going to kind of add that the recent attention on knife crime in London over the last month seems to have mainly began in terms of the extra coverage it's been getting with the girl called Katie, I think she was called. She was like a 15-year-old white girl who was kind of knifed in like a random attack, and I think that's kind of like the fear factor of like it spilling out of like the normal demographic that only applies to like 5% of the population.
She certainly got more because you thought, because it was an accident. I mean, you just felt, you know, this wasn't gang related. Yeah. This was something that nobody could quite understand. Yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right. But I mean, actually, I hear on the radio every day, you know, every Sunday we hear how many people, or every Monday morning we hear how many people killed in London at the weekend, and they were mostly young men, and you know, it isn't said, but I mean, a lot of them were black, right? Go on.
So I was going to say, it's also mistaken identity. I feel like that's why it's kind of spilled over, because now I got in Finsbury Park, somebody thought I was part of a rival gang I wouldn't stop like asking me, threatening me with a knife,
Right.
want to steal my phone. And like, how do you prove you're not, like, how do you prove, I'm a student, I need to go write my coursework. How do you prove that? So there's that threat that you could just be mistaken as somebody else.
Oh, yeah.
So I feel that's part of what's kind of...
It is, but
That
it
could be
also,
used.
it's got out of control, right?
Yeah.
And it's also, I mean, frankly, you know, the Evening Standard wants to attack the Mayor of London. And President Trump attacks the Mayor of London. I mean, the whole thing brings it up. And there are, you know, there is now knife crime on the street. And you're right. And in a way, the news stories has given permission for more people to carry knives. I mean, it's done the opposite of what it should have done. Okay, what else?
Andrew online is suggesting conflict or criticism.
Oh, God, you are wonderful. That is the other absolutely... Oh, this is terrible. The absolutely main thing... Right, conflict. I mean, that's the way news is covered. So it used to be about climate change, is that somebody'd say, yes, it knows, and then you'd have Nigel Lawson saying, no, it doesn't really exist, and actually the temperatures have gone down until he was found to be lying. So what people are going to say is what's the opposite, is people like conflict. So if you know, wherever you are, you need to think what's being said that I can go up against. So when people go, oh, this is a heat wave, and you say, you know, this is actually really terrible, whereas people, you know, most people go, well, you know, we can enjoy it. You need to think of the opposite. So one of the things about dealing with when you're trying to get publicity is to hang on to a news story that's already going and saying, you know, that person is completely wrong. Now, as I say, I think that it's moved so that not many people are going to say it's not an emergency. I mean, it's not happening, but I think you have to think about, you have to say this isn't good enough. This is just complacency. But you can do that. I mean, and they love arguments, right? That's what, I mean, you know, if you read, yes?
So you mean even just creating a conflict in the sort of story,
Yeah.
rather than it doesn't have to be about conflict?
Oh, it doesn't, no,
Yeah.
no. Look, I mean, how do we report politics in this country? We report politics as conflict, right? We don't report politics as we're trying to get somewhere. We report politics as people arguing against each other. And that's what we like. That's what makes news, is people disagreeing with each other. So I think that's it. Now, there are other things that I'm going to quickly put in, like pictures. If you've got good pictures and you're trying to get into a newspaper. Now, one of the most important ways at the moment of getting into a newspaper is actually using social media, right? Because what's interesting is when they talk about a news cycle, people read it as this happens and then that. But actually, what happens if you're a journalist is that you listen to the Today programme, you then go into The Guardian, you find out what else is happening, you said this is happening, and the people on the Today programme will read the Daily Mail, right? And say this is happening. So that is the news. But now they use social media a lot. But obviously social media, and there are two problems with social media. One is mostly it's an echo chamber, okay? And so, and obviously it's incredibly, people get really outraged. So you've got to work out how to get out of the echo chamber. You've got to do good pictures. You've got to be witty, right? Or you can be outraged, but there's an awful lot of outrage on Twitter. But you want to be part of the conversation so that people begin to notice you. And social media is just part of the way. I mean, the number of stories that one reads that began on social media, or almost a report of, you know, some Twitter outrage about various things. So that's important. But I think that the two things that you need to think about is making sure that you have stories about people. Mark was absolutely right. You have to have a story, but you have to have you want a person in it. And you don't want, I mean, it was quite interesting. I was just reading this Russian book, Life and Fate. And the chapter I was reading last night was about a train full of people going off to, it's set in World War II, and these are Russian Jews who've been captured by the Germans and are obviously going to go off to Auschwitz or something. And instead of saying all these people are murdered, what he does is he takes individuals so that you're with the individual and you realise that person is going to be murdered. And he takes various, and that is what matters. Because if you say, Mark said 1.2 million people a year die from air pollution, but that's nothing compared to one child in South London, whose name I forget, but, who did die from air pollution. But
I was just going to say, there's actually been studies to say that our empathy level, when it's an individual person, like actually the more people you add, the less empathetic we are. So it almost does just become a number.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the same with refugees, right? I mean, I think, Sam, you know Philly, don't you? I mean, somebody who lived in my house who, when she saw the picture of that Greek policeman with the dead child in his arms, went and did things for refugees, and she now works for refugees, right? It changed her. I mean, so you can do wonderful things if you think but it is about people, and it's like, you all saw the pictures of the Rio Grande, the father and his daughter. That will affect people in America. It's not going to affect Trump. It's probably not going to change, because actually the refugees didn't change life. It motivated some people. But I think you need, so it is about people, and do think about disagreeing with people. Okay. So,
sorry, can I just ask
of course,
question?
Sorry.
How do you keep that image then in their minds? Because that refugee image, and especially because of the pace of the news cycle, the pace of information in general in the modern society, people are very quick to forget, and it's because of information overload. Like, it's really hard to store and consolidate and consume and make sense of all this information coming at you. So how do you take it from one sensationalist image that stirs up a very visceral reaction and may cause some activity for 1 week, 2 weeks? He might volunteer one time, but how does it become a serious kind of plan of action? Okay,
so you take something that has literally gone viral, right? I mean, it's very interesting. I talk about the child in the policeman's arms. I mean, that is, I don't know, 5 years ago, right? All of you remember it. I mean, that sometimes there are images that absolutely do, and you just build on it. You take and you have to build on it and build on it and build on it, and that is what a communication strategy is that you take. Often you take one story and you work out how you're going to do it instead of it being really broad. So I was doing violence against women in Morocco, and I said to them, right, so let's divide it. So we will do, rape in marriage. We will do sexual harassment on the street. We will do child marriage, because many of them are still getting married very young. And we've divided it into so that how do you do a campaign on each of those? And the problem with climate change is it's enormous. And actually, you want to get it into little bits. And so, if you want to do food shortages, that's fine. If you want to do air pollution, that's fine. But you need to, as you're wonderful, instead of, thank you very much, instead of having to do everything, you do a little, and that's how you work it through. Because actually, doing too much, and the interview with the person from Extinction Rebellion. The problem is if you're just saying climate change is a disaster, you have to be able to take it down so that we can think about the little bits. And actually anything that you do in climate change is a good thing. I mean, it was like, anything that any campaign that we could run in North Africa and the Middle East, because it was Lebanon and Egypt as well, was going to be a good thing. We didn't have to deal with the whole problem. We were never going to get rid of violence against women, but we could begin in a small way with one campaign. And it's all part of it. Yes, sorry.
I was just going to say, what you just said rings true to me, because I've always thought that social change is very slow anyway, and sort of the folly sometimes of activism is to try and fix a problem in one go. Good example I always bring up is how long ago did the suffragette jump under the King's carriage, and we're still having it, but it generation by generation social change does happen. So if you do pick that one thing and make some difference, rather than, I just think it's true that social change is very, very slow.
It's very, and at the moment we haven't got time, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, but also you talked about information overload. I mean, sometimes, so there are lots and lots of people, around, and they choose different charities. But actually what they're all trying to do is to make the world a better place. And that's the thing about climate change is that if you could talk about air pollution and talk about it seriously, you'd then say, look, we are ruining the world. But let's begin with a child dying of asthma from air pollution, right? Can you just hand me my book, which is behind, because it just had, thanks. Right. So what you want with is that you need to have a campaign, and you need to have a sustained campaign that and what I would suggest is that you have a grid, that you actually think, because what lots of people are really good at doing is that you launch something, right? So you have a launch, and then, as you say, it goes, right? So you have a day and everything's great, but then what do you do next, right? And so you do need to have, so week 1 is your launch, but what else are you going to do? What else, what are the other things that you can add into the mix, right? And one is, one of the things we didn't do is the really important people are celebrities, right? So you get a celebrity in week 2 to say, this is really important. I mean, Mark Rylance saying, I will not be in the Royal Shakespeare Company because they're sponsored by BP, has done more damage to BP, right? Even though Maureen Lipman says it's silly, Miriam Margolis comes out for it. So what you're doing is what, if I said, I'm not going to fill up my car from BP because of the appalling things they do. And if I said I won't go to an RSC play, because it wouldn't matter, but because Mark Rylance does it. So you need, and in that way, so celebs, I mean, and they're music people, it's whatever. And they go for certain, age groups, demographics, they all work. Politicians are interesting, because they are powerful. I mean, actually, I was at a big Labour Party do where we were talking about policy on Wednesday night, and guess what? Climate change wasn't even mentioned. We weren't allowed to talk about Brexit because obviously that splits the Labour Party and they don't like it. But I mean, you just think, how can you talk about an industrial policy if you're not talking about climate change? And it wasn't as important as housing. What was it? It was housing, industrial and health. They didn't think that this was what mattered, right? actually, if they did think it was what mattered, if they did more than just have a conference about it, I mean a motion about it, it would. So you need to think about third-party endorsement. Also, I mean, the obvious thing, which is what Extinction Rebellion did, is it got masses of media coverage. And it did change things. It made people think. And one of the reasons they did it so well was because they did it with humour, right?
When you say did it, you mean like a big action?
A big action is great. A big action does have to make a real difference. So blocking the bridges of London was a good idea, but it didn't quite do it. Having a boat in Oxford Circus was brilliant. And what was interesting is that although the Daily Mail, which I do read every day, was vituperative about it, actually the people who were held up were just shrugging. The policemen, I mean, the Daily Mail did criticise the police for being really nice because they just thought, and it was great. And then they made the mistake of talking about Heathrow. Well, that's our holidays. Right? We do not mess about with our holidays. Okay? Heathrow was a mistake. The government can then say it could be terrorism. It's all bad. So you have to think about actions where you're going to get people on your side. Yes.
The reason they blocked those 5 bridges was just those 5 bridges were chosen specifically because they knew those 5 bridges are used by the London Marathon, and there are plans to change the traffic around those 5 bridges. Is the reason that those 5 bridges were chosen specifically is on the book.
Yeah. Okay, but
so it didn't cause any damage,
No. I'm not saying they caused damage. What I'm saying is actually the whole of Britain didn't know about it. Right? It was done on a Saturday. For some reason, the Saturday news isn't quite as big. I mean, when you plan an action, what I'm saying is, if you compare the bridges to what they did in Oxford Circus, where they caused absolute chaos, the Oxford Circus one worked better. I'm not saying the bridges didn't work, but the Oxford Circus was incredible, right? And it's how do you plan an action that really works, but you keep people on side, which is what really matters. So you think about actions, and all the time you're looking at the news and saying, how can I get into the news? How can I latch on to something? Latch on to anything? And frankly, there should be a climate change story every week.
I think that's what really annoyed me about this rebellion, was that at first I was really excited about it, and then when I saw them actually talking to the news, I kind of realised that there was not much substance to it, and that's fine really, because it's people who aren't experts in this thing, they just really care, and rightly so. But there needs to be people on the front line of that actually.
No,
have suggestions.
I am going to come to how to talk on the media, because I absolutely agree with you that actually you've got to have spokespeople who know what they're doing.
Do you think that part of the problem was, for example, the zero emissions within 6 years or something, and do you think that alienated a lot of people into thinking they're up in the air, they're not really...
Well, if you're going to do that, you have to explain it,
Yeah.
right? Well, I'm going to come to that, okay?
It's a very difficult thing to
Okay,
explain.
so what I'm saying is you need a campaign strategy, you need to think how to get in the media, you need to think what the media is looking for, right? They are not looking for worthy, boring stories, okay? This isn't academia. They're looking for stuff that people are interested in. But coming to the next thing, so this is something I use a lot with political parties abroad, and it was the Labour Party who taught it to me. And it's crude, but I hope you'll remember it. Is that so? If this is the people who believe in climate change, and this is climate change deniers, right? I think we are down to about here with the really, really heavy climate change deniers, right? And I think we're probably about here with the people who are like you, right? I think we've got more on that side than this side.
But not much, by the way.
Okay, And then you've got the people who go, you know, I look outside, everything goes on as normal. Do I really want to do anything? So you've got the soft. I think the soft is really big for agreeing with it, actually. I mean, I'm willing to have more soft. And this is the middle, right? Now, the people you want are these people. And it's quite interesting because Sam knows my son, who, you know, I always slightly joke, thinks I'm somewhere to the right of Genghis Khan. And I say to him, if you can't convince me, who is sort of somewhere here, then you don't stand a... I mean, there's no point in just talking to other activists. You've got to do this. I mean, you know, we've got to have the people come around, and which was, you know, that's why the Oxford Circus thing worked so well, is that it made people think, and actually it made ordinary people think, okay? You didn't have to be a climate change activist. You didn't have to be vegan. You didn't have to be any of those things to think, actually, they've got a point. And that's what people need, you know, that's what all of us need to build on. And these people are the most... Sorry, Sam.
So just to clarify, so you've got the definitely agree on the left,
Yeah.
and then what the sort of soft agree.
Yeah.
So they're kind of sympathetic, but they don't identify as...
Yeah.
And then the middle is, what, undecided?
Yeah, the middle is, you know, nothing is really moving. I mean, the middle is, well, I think probably the soft comes probably, I mean, I think most people think that there is a problem with climate change, but it's so big that we don't really know what to do, and so we might as well just go on living. And actually, it's quite interesting. Two friends of mine, I mean, one who is an extinct rebellion person, sort of, she goes, oh, you know, all of you, you're not worried enough. I wake up in the middle of the night, really worried. And she drives to the Isle of Wight every weekend. And you just think, yeah, I mean, she's gone vegetarian.
To the Isle of Wight.
Right, it's about a 2-hour drive. I mean, so you sort of think it's so difficult. I mean, that's the problem with climate change. It is so difficult to get your head round, which is one of the reasons I'm doing little. But all I'm saying is that when you're thinking about influencing people, you are not influencing your lot. You're influencing these people. This is the only way that things change. Okay? I mean, many, many years ago, before practically everybody in this room was born, they were going to cut the abortion limit really bad. They were going to make abortion practically illegal. It was a Tory government. It was the beginning of Tory, and everybody, and it looked as though it was going to lose. We were going to lose it, and I actually went and got involved. I said, well, I know we're going to lose it, but I want to be able to say to my grandchildren, I tried. And what happened was there was a women's magazine that wasn't at all radical, and it did a poll, and 80% of women thought abortion was a matter between them and their doctor. End of. And it was those women that changed everything. As soon as that poll came out, the politicians thought, not going to fight this one. I mean, and of course we did all, you know, we lobbied Parliament, we did lots and lots of things. We did all the things, but actually I know that I needn't have done anything because it was that poll. And that poll was about the people in the middle, okay? It wasn't about us. I mean, you know, possibly if we hadn't have worked at it, I mean, I think everybody is a cog in a machine, but I think that's what you need. So that is quite important. And then we want to think how to communicate. So you know that you're communicating with these people. And you want to get what this is called a message box. Right. And this is how to develop a message. Now, Mark was absolutely right that you need the language and you need lots of ideas about language. But the first thing is it's what do you want to say, okay? And then what are they saying? And what do you say about them? And what do they say about you? And if you work out those 4 things, you've basically got your message, okay? Is that because that means you know what you're saying and what you're up against. And it's really, really important. And I mean, I think the biggest thing you're up against is there's nothing we can do. Yes, sorry.
Is they the people that we're trying to get to in the middle, or are they the climate deniers?
Well, I think they're sort of there. I mean, and in a way, where the mainstream media are at the moment. I mean, I think we've got over the climate change deniers. I mean, I think we do not have to worry about Nigel Lawson saying there's been no increase because he has been shot down. And I think, but what we've got is this is too expensive, right?
Yeah.
This just can't be done. This is too big. This is, that's what you're up against.
I know people that, well, actually, the majority of people I come across, they don't deny it at all. They're just like, yeah, I know, we're fucked.
Yeah, absolutely.
like it does. They don't require any more information. Like there's no more, educating that they need. They've got the same information. They understand the problem. They've just got a different conclusion and course of action.
Okay, and that's right. So what you have to say is we're not fucked.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
I mean,
yeah.
I think the biggest message is we can do something about this.
Yeah.
And frankly, if we can't, then we are fucked, and there's no point in us being in this room. Okay? I mean, might as well just go out and enjoy the sun. Yes.
I think part of the reason that people come to that conclusion of that we're fucked is that there are so many vested interests on that side that for such a structural problem, it does seem like such a mountain to climb, there's no point in starting it and stopping halfway.
I think the problem is as well is a lot of activists don't believe that. They believe that if you were given the right information and you understood what was going on with climate change, you would automatically, by magic, just become a fucking activist. It's not true.
No,
so they focus their attentions a lot of the time on, well, let's get more information out there, let's get more awareness out there. It's like, well, maybe that's the wrong thing. People already know what's going on. You know what I mean?
So maybe your campaign has got to be what we ought to be doing.
But I think also people would be encouraged if they saw one of these vested interests, or if they saw more of professionalism on this side. There's
Definitely.
if needs be, we could even take control and sort this out. Do more suits in front of cameras, that kind of thing. It's like, it sounds silly, but just appearing more.
I'm absolutely going to come to that, right? Because I do agree. But first, you do need to get. Sorry, Luca.
No, pass, please.
But I'm not telling you what your message is, right? I'm telling you how to get there, and then you can work out what your message is. But I absolutely agree that what we don't need is more info. And it's a bit like the referendum campaign. I am an absolutely dyed-in-the-wool Remainer. My problem with the Labour Party. As they should be, because it's best for people. But actually, the Remain campaign was rubbish.
Oh, it was awful.
Absolute rubbish.
So
Because anyway.
Jeremy didn't want it. He was reading off a piece of paper on purpose in front of the van. He really didn't want
don't even talk to me about that one. I think it was really, really important. I think leaving the EU it's terrible for this.
It's terrible for climate.
It's terrible for
change,
loads.
No, it's massive.
Oh yeah, because
But
we.
isn't it the shock we need?
Well, it's a distraction, I think.
No, that's crazy.
I don't think
Most
we
of our
do
environmental regulation comes from the EU.
The first thing Boris is going to do when we crash out with a no deal is kill the regulations. Forget it.
We need to grow industry because we're going to end up with a massive economic impact.
Yeah.
The last thing we're going to want to do is regulate our industry. Sorry.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is you are right. This is how to develop a message. And it can be a develop a message for a big campaign, for a little campaign, but you need to get, because if you get your message wrong, and I think that's one of the problems that you were talking about Extinct Rebellion when they go on the radio and TV, is they've got one sentence. What they haven't got is a message with things coming off it. And, quite often, you do a message and you say climate change is terrible, but what we can do is, and what the government has to do is, And we can lobby the government to do this, and the government should do that. And actually, if we don't have solutions, and I say this to many, many organisations, if we don't have solutions, and you've said this morning, people just turn off. So that is the message box. Now, what to do?
You don't need that. You don't need that. You got the special things.
It should work if you use the
Oh, right.
the blue one.
Okay. Wonderful.
This works. There you
Oh, right. Thank you. I'm losing it. Okay. So,
Don't get it wet. Don't get it wet. Yeah?
Yeah,
Not
but
warm.
just about there.
right.
And you
There.
we need a dry one.
I thought it was only technology.
Maybe
Yes.
the other side. Fine.
We've gone old school and it's
Yeah.
just as problematic.
Send it round.
What is on the back?
No, we could, it'll do. This will be fine. This will be fine, and I can clean it
I
at
think
some
using
stage.
that one is-
Okay, so you're on the TV. Okay, so what do you do? And first of all, I'm going to talk about the message. So what you need to do is you need to think that what is my objective of the interview? Sorry, I think this is moving. Objective, okay? Because what a TV interview does, or a radio interview, or even talking to a journalist, is you're trying to persuade them. So you're persuading them, and it might be, but you haven't a clue to, actually, I've got a clue. It might be there are solutions, but that's what you're doing. And basically, you want to think, what are the three things? And that's why you're so right. Three things. You don't have one thing that you just say over and over again that we all know, right? So what are the three things that are going to persuade people? And first of all, when you think, who am I speaking to? And you are speaking almost always to the general public. Now, sometimes, I mean, if you're on Newsbeat or, some music station or something like that, you will be talking to younger people. Right, and so you can use slightly different language. But I get worried when people go, oh well, really I'm made, and people do say this, really I'm made for Newsnight, right? And actually, people who watch Newsnight don't necessarily know everything, to put it mildly, about climate change, right? And all of you are perfectly intelligent, but you have to think, how much do you know about how the health service works or local government? So you've got an audience of people who are perfectly intelligent, and that cuts across all the classes, but they're probably quite ignorant, right? Of course they know about climate change. We're not that ignorant. But it is, I often say to people, and feminism has not done me a favour in this, think of your mum. Mums are great to talk to, right? For older people, it's also teenage children who go, oh, you're so boring. And it's how not to be boring. But you need to think about, so what are the three things that are going to persuade people, okay? And that's what we're doing is persuasion. And then you need to think about language. And we need to think about it in two terms. Is no technical terms, right? If you have to work out how to do it, it's got jargon really, really doesn't travel. And stuff that you use all the time in your groups will just not work. And quite often, if you're listening to the radio, you'll hear a reporter going, that means, when somebody's being too, but you don't want to be there. So you want to not, but also you want to use language that is really effective. So it's going back to what you said about, not just fact. Of course, you can use a fact. And you can say, air pollution kills over 1 million people every year. Only in South London, we know that whatever her name was, died from it. There are lots and lots of children, in school, in city schools, who are developing asthma because of it, right? That's you don't have to do. I mean, that's just an example. But you need to think. You need to think, how am I going to, what's the sort of language I'm going to use? And I mean, what I say to politicians is, you know, we don't talk about education, we talk about schools. And we don't talk about the health service, we talk about hospitals or GPs. We don't talk about medical practitioners, we talk about nurses and doctors, right? I mean, that it's that sort of language that you really need to get. And the most effective, I mean, you listen to Nigel Farage, right? He knows the language. I mean, he gets it, right? And it's people sort of trying to be grown up. And I mean, obviously academics, I train a lot of academics, are a nightmare to try, and they say, I don't want to be dumbed down. I do not think that speaking in simple language is dumbing down. I actually think that you have to be really bright to turn something into simple language. And then, as I keep saying, you use examples. And one example is just worth going on and on. I mean, it's like a picture is worth 1,000 words. An example is fantastic. And again, I always say this to politicians. You know, people, I always say, people say to me, and then I say, you can say whatever you want, right? But you say, people say to me. But you want an example. I mean, and for you lot, it's really important that everything you say is factual. And I know, I agree with you that that facts aren't enough, but you get it wrong, and they'll go for you, right?
Credibility's gone.
So everything, so you need to think before you do your interview that, and then you need to think, what are the nasty questions? And I mean, Ed Miliband was interviewed. He's been interviewed twice recently. Once he was really good, and the other was, I mean, the nasty question. So what are you going to do? Well, you know, we're just going to. And doesn't this mean people should stop flying, right? So the nasty questions are, so should everybody stop driving? Should everybody stop flying? Do you fly? You know, do you, I mean, and they'll be personal. I mean, you know, Emma Thompson, who did wonderful things for Extinction Rebellion, then a picture was all over the Daily Mail about her flying, oh my God, business class to New York. I mean, you know, and there she was called, and eating beef, right? So she was called a complete hypocrite. So you have to have the answers to those questions. And what do you expect people to do, right?
Would you expect Emma Thompson rowing to New York?
Yeah, well, absolutely. No, I mean,
No.
I know.
There should be a way to play back to the idiots that they're applying this kind of concept.
Well,
It's like I do a project. I work in the oil and gas, yeah? But as I said to Sam, I do rotation. And because of the money I'm making in the oil and gas, I will be able to spend my free time in something which is useful. And hopefully, something, the way will change.
Okay, so we would say to you, what are you doing working in an industry that by its very nature is bringing on climate change? And you have to have an answer for that, right?
I already have the answer. The industry is now changing into wind farms. So there's already major company that changed name, status, strategies.
Right.
So it's process is already happening.
Okay, but you'd have to do that, and then you'll have other people going, this is greenwash, go on.
I think that's kind of the trick, is that when you're talking about the future, you're less accountable to that. So if you're talking about the things are ongoing, things are in the process, they're in the pipeline. Like we can, you know, if they say, oh, should we stop flying? Well, I can say, well, we can't rule out the idea of solar-powered planes. We can't rule that out, and they can't say we can rule it out because it's a prediction of the future. So I think that because it's such a technology, I mean, the solutions to it are so kind of entrenched in technological progress that if the kind of argument is, well, you're trying to predict innovation, you're trying to predict the future, we're trying to just stimulate the uncertainty into a good direction.
Okay, so I think this is really problem. So if I said, do you think, so are you going to stop flying? You're going to say, well, they'll invent solar.
No, I'd say no, it wouldn't. The point isn't tiny little changes, it's more structural. It doesn't help.
Like? I want the like. What you have to convince me that you don't have to stop flying because
we haven't tried
No.
setting up an EU investment bank.
no, I want an answer, right? This is why it's really difficult. Have you got an answer?
Sort of. It's more this idea of the media requiring hypocrisy of people, and maybe that's also something that feeds into what you were saying earlier about what makes something newsworthy is when you point out, we love to point out people's hypocrisy because it allows us to feel superior. And that's also a wider narrative that we have just sociologically in society, that we like to point out when people are inconsistent because we associate inconsistency in messaging with insanity. And we like to think that this is why we require politicians to stay on message, to stay, stay true to what they said they will, and not acknowledge changing circumstances or shifting tectonic plates or the actual reality of situations.
Okay, but have you got an answer?
I haven't got an answer. I just wanted to say that I think what really needs, like, what you're getting through to us, and I think should come through to us, is this isn't a fair game.
No.
Like, no one's looking to play fair, like in the media and that. If they, you put yourself out there, you said something, and, you're open for attack. So if you aren't, I don't think, people rely on, but I'm good-natured or I'm good-hearted or whatever. It's not going to work. They're going to rip you into pieces.
Yeah,
You've got to be so
so I want the
bulletproof.
answer to what. Go on.
So I would say that, to be a climate activist and to fly and eat beef is better for the environment than to not be a climate activist and fly and eat beef. I mean, everyone's got different styles.
No, that
It's
isn't.
not going to fly.
That isn't going to work.
That's going back to the intention.
But
It's
you
good
can
enough.
say you can say
Right.
it's like hypocritical for like an 80-year-old lady who eats lentils instead of meat and doesn't go on holiday, but doesn't make any effort to spread the message or whatever. You could say
Then you're
that
in
she's
tit for
doing
tat.
No, so what you're saying is you're good. That isn't
It is-
what
that's
what,
what- yeah.
what you have to is you have to move it from the personal, right? You have to move it from the personal to say, it's not about whether people are
It's a
flying.
bit of transfer of responsibility.
It's a structural,
Well, I mean, if none, as none of you are going to take personal responsibility for what you do, I'm trying to find an answer. So what you say is it's not about the individual. What we need is government action. Which now tell me what's supposed to happen.
structural change.
I don't know what structural
It
change
doesn't mean
is.
anything.
I want to know what you think
As in,
should happen.
innovation, just infrastructure,
It's not. You're using
it's
words
not
I
an
don't
answer.
understand.
do
What do you want government to do?
Invest in green technology.
And this will save us, will it?
Well,
So if we have more wind farms.
there won't be there isn't a single solution. It's all these things at the same time.
Okay,
At the same
okay.
time.
That is the good beginning. Is there is no silver bullet, okay? There's no silver bullet, but what we should be doing is investing in green technology. I mean, I thought we'd only got 12 years, but anyway. What else? I mean, is that what we have to have is a government who is absolutely committed to
Working with companies, air companies, and make sure for example, every single flight leaves one of our airport is full, because sometimes you have different flights leave.
Look at this isn't real, right? I mean, you lot saying we can fly as long as they make sure the planes have. What we have to do is what is the answer full aeroplanes? It isn't.
No.
Yeah, there isn't the answer. I think the answer or answers aren't very clear because it's a thing with technology and innovations that a few years ago we forecasted solar and wind to get to a certain level, and now it's completely rocketed it. So it's about having faith that we can't predict results. We can't.
I want answers. You're saying
as in what things do we pay for? What things do we put in?
You're saying to me, right? What is happening isn't good enough. So I'm saying, what are the answers? And infrastructure is not an answer. I mean, what we have to, we can say we have to have a government that is committed to fighting climate change, which means, first of all, that we are talking about green technology, right? We are talking about wind farms, tidal, solar panels on every house, on every building. You have to begin by saying, you know, and I mean, what is it? Electric cars? I mean, I don't know.
But that won't be the solution. No, nobody.
So
even
what's
if we
the solution?
Is to not try to predict before we start, because it's impossible to predict.
Right. So why am I bothering?
Yeah. Why am I even listening to
Yeah.
you?
Yeah.
Well, no, because it's just got to start. You've got to, what comes first?
Start with what?
But start with what?
Right. What comes first? Electric cars, electric charging ports.
They're there.
The government has to enact it. The government.
They're everywhere.
Okay.
Are they? Are they there enough?
They're a long way off being
There's like probably 6 in North London.
No, I know, but you, but look, but you, I mean, you have to say there are things the government can do.
I have an idea. I think that I'm pretty new to this whole topic, yeah, and I'm looking to try and see what the answers are. And from the research that I've seen, nobody really has an answer. So maybe,
So we can't predict.
hold on, what we need is R&D, huge amounts of research
exactly.
going
I know.
into
I know, but you need
to
to
the
put.
new solution.
Yeah, but it's like,
Because
and
we
then
don't know.
no.
So predict. So you're
No,
saying.
I'm not saying
No,
this.
you're
So
both
you're
saying-
saying we can't predict.
But
saying
you're
what I
both
said.
saying the same, and
Yeah.
so that's fine. I don't have to do anything because R&D will solve it. Right? What you have to do is
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
is you have to begin to say what the government should be doing. And if you're saying, well, you know, it's not really about us. The government should just be doing lots and lots of R&D stuff to find the answer. Well, I mean, Tony Blair said that, frankly, about 15 years ago, and I didn't believe him then.
But we never tried. That's the problem. We don't have a public investment bank to try this.
Okay, so what we say is, but that's what is, instead of saying we don't know, you say what we have to do is we have to be seriously investing in the future, which means green technology, green energy.
But which ones then? Because that's the same.
No,
it's the same.
I don't. They don't. You have to begin. You know, and you name them, right? We have to. You know, we have to take solar panels seriously. We have to do this. We have to. You know, we have to get more people onto public transport. I don't know what the answer is, but if you tell me the answer is R&D,
It's no good.
it's fine because I don't have to do anything, right? And as long as you know, it's what are you asking the government to do? That's what I want to know.
To set, because they've taught the Green Alliance report 2017. They all said the same thing, which was like, it's all good, you know, cutting our meat consumption, riding to work, but all of that is a drop in the ocean, especially even if
Yeah,
we,
I know.
even
So
if we clear,
tell me what you want them to do. Don't tell me what isn't working. What works?
Try and start internalising costs.
What?
Try and start internalising costs. So
I don't know what is internalising costs.
tax.
yeah, tax more on flying.
Right. So if you want to tax flying, that's fine, but that's a specific, and then you have to have the whole thing. So you think that, you know, only rich people should be allowed to fly. Fine.
But I was sorry. Could you? It's not just R&D. It's not just the purpose of investing in these things in the hope that one of them will pop out. And it's the nature of innovation technology in itself is that they all end up. There are like synergies within them. There are spillover effects with all different types. So like, if there are advances in hydrogen fuel cells, there'll be advances in hydrogen-powered cars.
Okay.
If there's competition between
But-
electric cars and hydrogen cars, maybe they both improve.
Well, okay, so what I don't think we're arguing,
Yeah.
but what I'm saying is the way you express it, which is fine, my son does the same, it just completely lets the individual off the hook. And that's fine, but what you have to say is, you know, this is a problem that can only be solved by governments throughout the world actually taking it seriously and investing in innovation, and at the same time, you know, using green power. And because I mean, isn't that better? I mean, shouldn't we be using solar power, or doesn't it matter?
No, yeah, but we have to use all of them because we don't know how.
Yeah,
far
so
solar panels-
we have to begin by saying
Yeah.
we should be using solar power, we should be using wind power, we should be investing in that, and we should also be looking at other ways, and we should be getting serious. How much money does this government use on R&D investment in that sort of new technology?
Not massive amount.
I don't
Well,
know.
somebody's got to, if you're going to tell me the answer is investment, I want to know what's going on now. You don't have to have many facts.
Are we expected to answer as if this
Yeah.
was like a news interview, like now here.
Well,
Or just give
well,
an
I want you
idea.
to go away and think about it. But yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I need answer, right? Is that if you do a news interview, they expect you to. I mean, if you say the government isn't investing very much, that's fine. If you say, look, you know, what we need is 3 billion invested in it, and instead they're putting 3 billion into oil and gas, and you know, 10 million into. Do you see what I mean? But you need to build me a picture instead of saying it's all about the future and infrastructure and R&D.
Would it also help if you link that problem to other things, like for example jobs, housing? If you could say, you know, this doesn't need to be a threat to jobs. Like we would need loads of people to.
Afterwards, but when they say, first of all, I want the answer, right? I want when I say what do you want, you have to tell me. Okay.
I think
Sam.
it's a little bit like the problem that I would say the scientists in the climate change field have probably had for about 30 years, where they're saying, you know, in a very sort of true to their profession way, we can't be 100% sure because that doesn't really exist.
Yeah.
And so they've ended up not really saying anything, and even though they might be right, and I think the point is, in terms of messaging and media, even if it's not perfect, you've got to at least put some stepping stones to where we're trying to get to, because otherwise no one listens.
Yeah,
So
you
I
get
want to know-
destroyed as well. You get destroyed. There'll be some guys on the other side if you're on a debate panel or anything like that, and they will destroy you if you're not really ready for the nasty questions. They'll make you look stupid.
Yeah.
And then people, your whole message is discredited.
Yeah.
Sometimes we rely too much on the fact, but we care. We're good people.
Absolutely.
That doesn't mean, in honesty, that doesn't really mean anything.
Doesn't mean anything at all. Doesn't mean anything at all. Right. So you need to prepare what you're going to say. Okay, and you need to think through the nasty questions, which are really obvious. I mean, they're about your personal habits. Well, I mean, when a nasty question is what is the answer, I think you have a problem with your interviews, right?
Yeah,
because that isn't even what I would call a nasty question. But it's the nastiest.
So is it? So like, would you say focus more on specifics, more on certain technologies, like trying to give simple descriptions of why they would work and how they would work and how you could scale them up, or keep it broader, keep it simpler, keep it, you know.
What were you? But I mean, you have 3 minutes, okay? So what you want to do is you want to say there is a real problem. You know, by 2030, we're going to be whatever, I don't know. You know, there is a real problem by 2030, and what we have to do is, or what this government has to do is. I mean, that's sort of your message, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, that's what you need to be saying. And then, you know, when they say, but isn't this going to cost a lot? Won't this mean jobs? And you go, no. I mean, we're talking about massive industries, actually. You know, we're talking about building new homes. We're talking about blah, 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 blah. So all of that is the message. But you've got to think, what are my answers? Okay, let me quickly go on to... I think what you two have been slightly alluding to is who are you going to put up? Okay, so if that is the impact, a pie chart that is the impact of a TV interview or presentation, about 7% are the words alone. Okay, now that isn't to say that if you screw this up, that's okay. But there are ways to make it better and make it worse. And the first thing is particularly if you're on TV, we see you before we hear you. And by the time you open your mouth, we've made up our minds. Okay? We can change it, but you have to think what you look like is a lot of the message. And so you have to think, I mean, was it you who talked about suits?
No.
Suits. I mean, I'm not saying you all have to wear suits, but you do all look like climate change activists. Yeah. And you all look as though you have no idea about government or business or anything. And Greenpeace, I mean, I think does make everybody, I think they make the men even wear ties. I'm big on ties. But I just think that if you look smart, you look more serious. Okay? I mean, it is like going into a job interview. And most men, and I spend ages on women because they're much more difficult. But most men, it's really simple. The big question is whether you wear a tie. Is you should wear a jacket and shirt, and the shirt should be ironed. And it's not just you lot I say it to, okay? It does, and and you just want to look good.
And,
yes.
And so where do you come down with tie or no tie if you're representing a kind of climate type movement?
I think these days no tie. I mean, I even tell MPs no tie, actually. I do say, I say if you're really, really serious, you know, if you're an accountant and it's about money, or if somebody's dead, you know, tie. Right. If you're doing a tragedy, but most, yes.
But I think also the whole Steve Jobs, Apple, Silicon Valley, like modern, that kind of look as well, in a way, really sells them as well as being futuristic, as being kind of in the future. It's kind of smart, but it's not the same, if you know what I mean. Just
well, it's up to you. I mean, I go back to what it's who are you trying to persuade, right? And
just on that, I think it depends on the context. I think if I was given a talk to, I don't know, like a hall full of people, and it wasn't really a TV interview, but then if you're on the 10 o'clock news, I don't know. It's like, are you playing their game or not?
So I would never look like this to go to one of my paying clients. I mean, I thought these are climate change activists. If I go looking smart, they're not going to believe a word I say. You know, so I'd better just dress like I normally dress when I'm at home, and that probably, and then it'll be. So appearance matters, and of course. But if you're, I mean, you do need to think. I mean, one thing is you want to start watching the news on TV to see you know what works and what doesn't work. So what you wear is the absolute basic. It's of course you can be trendy. I mean, but you just need to think about it. You need to think about it. Beards. I used to try and get people to shave them off, and I've given up. I think it's fine, but I do think. Oh yes.
Mine's usually cleaner than this.
Yeah. I mean, I think you need to look smart, because if you look scruffy, it looks as though you've got, you know, that you've got scruffy ideas. I mean, you know, I remember seeing. It was it was years and years ago. It was on Greenpeace, and there was this woman from Greenpeace, and she turned up in a boiler suit, and it took me until her third answer to make me realise she knew more than the other men on the panel. But actually, I wasn't taking her seriously. And one can say, you know, I'm a terrible biased right winger, but actually, what's really important is that people out there weren't taking her seriously, you all. So you do need to look smart. I mean, and you need to. That's okay. I don't have to talk to you about makeup, but if you are in a TV studio and offered it, take it, because a lot of yes.
I was going to say, if you do have any advice for women, I know not so many here, but just there might be some of you watching online.
Okay, women. What you want is it's a silhouette. So you want tidy hair, probably brushed back, and you want to look smart with no frills if possible. And the best way for women to look smart is to wear a jacket, right? Because it's the smart, it's the shapes. The paler the woman is, the more I would advise mascara at least. Because you need some definition of the eyes, and no difficult jewellery. I think I could probably get away with this because it's very plain, but what you don't want is anything that draws people away from what you're saying. So the other thing with women, no checks. I think this stripe might just be okay. But I'm not sure about it, and no loud patterns, and that goes for men with their ties. Is that Jon Snow from Channel 4 News makes a thing about his tie, but he is a presenter, he's on for ages and ages, and everybody knows about his ties. But you don't what you want is you want your clothes to make you just blend into the background so that what you're saying. The South African activist Steve Biko said, the more radical what you're going to say, the more conservatively you should dress. Okay. And I think he's right, actually. Yes, Sam.
And just, I guess, follow on from that, in terms of like, you know, different people have sort of different accents and like, you know, sometimes.
I'm going to get to voice.
Yeah.
I'm going to get to voice. I'm doing appearance at the moment. Okay, so the most important about what people see is your face, because most of it is sort of like this. I mean, you might have a walking shot, but I mean, frankly, I go on Sky quite a lot. I turned it down today for you. I could go in jeans as long as my top was okay. But your face is really important, and the most important is eyes. And what you need to do is you need to look the interviewer in the eye and keep them. Now, most people, when they think, their eyes go to the left. And actually, you want to make a real effort not to do that, because it looks as though you don't really know what you're doing or you're lying, right? So try and keep, and if your eyes are all over the place, it really, really distracts. A lot of people, when they're nervous, they might blink. And that, it's involuntary, there's nothing you can do about it. And it is about just calming yourself down, which I might get, if we've got time, I might get to. So that's eyes. So makeup is there, jewellery, that's the most thing. Don't, whenever I go on TV, I always get an itch just here. Don't itch it. It will go away, but you don't want to have your hands anywhere near your face. Body language. Okay, so most people are sitting down, and the rule is BBC. Bottom in the back of the chair, because, God, these boys are all, well, because most men in particular slouch. And they sit like this. And it just makes you look really complacent, right? So if you sit up, that's how to do it. And then put your feet on the ground, if possible. And begin your hands in your lap. Unless you're at a table, when you begin with your hands at the table. And then, if you talk with your hands, it's absolutely fine, right? It's that, and as long as you're not either going like this or it's all over your face. But lots of people, you know, they go, well, first of all, secondly, thirdly. Something's very big and something's very little. I mean, people talk with their hands really expressively. If you don't do it, it's absolutely fine. In particular, if men try and not talk with their hands, their voice will go into a monotone. I don't understand the physiology. Nobody's explained it to me, but I do know it's true. I have seen it. And so I always say, free up your hands. And what you want to do is you want to be as relaxed as possible before the interview. And this is equally true of radio, because we can hear radio. I know what I forgot. I forgot to put the word smile, which you can't really do if you're about to say everybody's going to die. But smiling makes you look human, right? And smiling is really good. And you can hear a smile on the radio, okay? And actually, you know, you can be not light-hearted, but you don't have to be deeply, deeply serious, because it's much easier to listen to you. So that's body language. And then voice. Now, obviously, if you are on the radio, you've only got your voice, right? And you have to use your voice. I mean, if you listen, use your voice to pull people in so that they're listening to you. And what you need to do is light and shade, conversational. And, you know, men, the reason there are so many boring men on the radio, it really is because they're frightened and they just go into a monotone. And once you do that, it's very difficult to listen to people. And when I train people, I always get them to chat to me about, you know, whatever, this and that, to just listen to their voices at ease. And I remember once having somebody who had a monotonous voice, and I thought, no hope. Absolutely no hope. If he's at his most ease, he's monotonous. But you need to relax yourselves. Women, when we squeak, I mean that's what we do when we get nervous. Is our voice boxes contract. And so when I was a radio reporter, I'd sit there and go to try and get my voice down. And really important is tone. If you are patronising, people are really pissed off. If you are defensive, they think that you're hiding something. So you have to appear to be open and informed, right? But it's like having a conversation. And I want all of you to go off and watch TV news, listen to talk radio, Radio 4, LBC, whatever it is, and listen to what works on the interviews, right? And it's not always people who are nice, you know. I mean, like Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage does a good interview, except when they really get him. But you can tell when people, you can't tell. We think you can tell when people are telling the truth. Yes, Sam.
Any good tips for either if somebody does sort of put the knife in and you can feel yourself getting a bit flustered, or similarly if you suddenly have, I don't know, brain freeze? Do you have any
I mean, it's amazing how seldom a brain freeze happens, actually. I mean, if you listen to the radio, there are lots and lots of people who are being interviewed who've never done it before. What you need to do is you need to be very, very clear on what you're going to say. I mean, the famous brain freeze was Natalie from the Green Party, which she said was, you know, the reason they went on was sheer sexism. Which really it wasn't. I mean, you know, she just didn't have the answers. So you don't do a serious radio or TV interview if you've got a really bad cold, if you've got a temperature, you know, all of those things. What you can say is, if you're talking, it's why I don't like talking about too many figures, is I don't really, I haven't got the exact number, but it's roughly. The other one was Diane Abbott, who in the last election got the police budget completely wrong, a complete nightmare. So you need to know. But what don't do, which is what I saw Dawn Butler doing last night about the Windrush stuff, is that she had her notes in front of her. I had her notes in front of her, and she kept on looking down at her notes. And it looked odd, and I knew what she was doing. And never, ever take your notes into an interview. If you've got if it's radio and you've got one big figure, then possibly. But honestly, it's like, you know, walking with a crutch when really you should be able to walk, and it makes you worse. Because actually Dawn could have done that interview fine. I mean, frankly, I could have done it. You know, it wasn't a difficult interview. So that's what I do. So the other thing is a way of dealing with nerves. I mean, if you feel yourself getting too nervous, what people always go is take a deep breath. Actually, it's breathe out. Is that when you get nervous, you tend not to breathe out, and you can hyperventilate, and you want to breathe out. But it is difficult on the radio. Oh yes, I know. Somebody who wanted me to do some interviews said that they'd heard a Supreme Court judge who was asked a question, and because they're used to being ponderous, there was a 7-second gap before they answered, right? Because they were thinking about it. We don't have 7 seconds. Which is why you need to think about what you're saying before you go in. And why you need somebody, you know, you need to think of you need to think of your weaknesses and the other weaknesses and how you're going to deal with them. One of the ways, so a smile, if you get a really bad question, a smile really helps, because on the TV, it makes you look very confident and gives you about 2 seconds. You can say, Keir Starmer was at Hay with Philippe Sands, who said, wouldn't the local elections have been much better if you'd have had a different leader? And his answer was, I thought you were my friend. And I think you can say, I mean, I think if you get the flying, are you perfect? You go, look, all of us have problems. That's why we all need to act together, because we need to find the solutions, which is not about whether I went on holiday last year or whatever. And I think that thing of being, I mean, I remember I was on the radio talking about hitting children, and I said, I think it's completely wrong. And I realised I said, you are talking to the person who hit their son in a supermarket. I mean, of course I'm appalling, but I do think it was wrong, right? Whereas, the big rugby player said, well, of course you should be able to hit your children. And I said, you know what? It's like being a 2-year-old or even an 8-year-old, this big guy. So I think that if you're stuck, you try and get personal, yes.
Would you say that's more of a kind of modern trend that people are seeking somebody who seems more human? And that's and almost an acceptance that actually in politics and media people lie all the time. So I kind of see Boris Johnson doing this, and there was a really interesting, they were on the Leave tour bus, and an interviewer was basically grilling him about the 350 million. And he basically turned it into this kind of, I'm lying. Everyone there knows I'm lying. And I'm smiling because I know that I'm lying. But it's part of the game. And he plays that game, and he doesn't hide the fact that he's playing that game. And Trump did the same thing, Farage did the same thing. And it's almost this acceptance that we lie in politics. And he had this kind of 350 million, no, I don't know what you're talking about, with a smile on his face. So is it,
breaking the fourth wall?
Yeah, breaking the fourth wall, just like, it doesn't really matter.
Well, I think it's wrong. I mean, the number of articles I've read by Conservatives saying we shouldn't have Boris Johnson as the Prime Minister because he's a liar and a cheat and has no principles is incredible. I mean, and you
people still lie, people still...
Look, that's what happens. You are judged by different standards, right? There is no question. You can't lie. You lie and it's over. I mean, look at what happened at East Anglia, that they had the scientists at East Anglia, and it looked as though they might have played with the data. It was top news. You cannot afford... What's the time, Sam?
1:45.
Right. You cannot afford to do that, right? So you can afford to be personal, to say that you're not perfect. That's very different from lying. And of course, what you don't do is I presume they'll say, how did you get to the studios? I mean, you have to try and live a reasonable, climate change life. That I think that it's quite difficult. But I think that's the way of doing it. But you need to have thought out the answers before.
Would you say having a kind of a semi-pre-prepared bit that you could kind of whip out in that, so as to not stop, just so you can...
Yeah. Oh no. Look. I prepare people for TV interviews. I mean, and then the trick is to make it sound like they're not... You'll barely hear a serious person. I mean, John McDonnell, who I think actually does get the message across very well. I think Jeremy has yet a lot to learn. I think he does know how to appeal to the middle people who will not remember his past. But don't tell me that John doesn't rehearse every single interview with all the difficult questions. I mean, that's what they do. You'll never find a serious business person, third sector person who has not done the interview, prepped with somebody like me, or with their comms person. And you're mad if you go into an interview unprepared. Partly because if you say, I remember doing people, and they'd go, oh, you can interview me about whatever you want. I don't need to prepare. And you go, but if you don't prepare, not only can you make mistakes, but you don't know what you want to say. Because you're doing an interview to say, it's your chance for free advertising, right? So you work out what you want to say, but you also work out all the difficult questions.
Got a question from Andrew online, who asks, is it more important to spend your time correcting the lies or mistakes that the other side say, Or is it a better strategy to use your limited time to explain your view and more or less ignore them?
Okay, I think it's a really good question, she says, which is always the way when you don't know. So I would say that certainly when it's me, what I go is, you go, that just isn't true, and then you go on and say what you want to say, right? But you don't go, well, because you don't want to go into, he's absolutely right to ask the question, you don't want to go into nitpicking, but you just say, that just is not true. And then you go back to what you want. But you do not let them, you don't let them dictate the terms. Because you might not want to be onto whether it's, I don't know, 4 parts per million or 4.5 parts. I mean, all of that stuff, and then that's it. But you have to know your stuff, and you just, and it's when they say, you know, but we can't afford it, and then you go, we have to afford it. I mean, it's about turning their answer into what you need to say.
What about this? You often see people doing it, almost praising the questioner in order to kind of absorb the body blow of a difficult question.
Absolutely, no, that's what they quite often do is
That's a fantastic question, and you're very right to answer it.
And I'm going to answer something completely different.
Yeah.
It's about giving time, and it's about I think you can say. And sometimes you can genuinely say that's a really important question because that's what a lot of people ask me, exactly. Right? So actually, it's a really important question because I'm asked it a lot and I know the answer, right? And I listen to people all the time. And one of the things is that it's really important that all of you at least sound, but also do, that you listen to and talk to people who are not like you, right? I mean, you will learn so much from people who are not like you. And their questions are the questions that are going to get asked and that people want answers to. I think I've gone on for a very long time. Yeah, sorry.
One question. You often hear this kind of look. And then they go into this. Is that like a thing? Like I hear and see that a lot, like politicians. They get asked a difficult question. And they have this look. What it's actually about is da-da-da. And
Farage does say
It's authority.
Look, like what is that? Like what is that a mechanism?
I think
is that
it's
a proper thing they all learn, or is that just?
Yeah, I think it's a way. I mean, they probably have learnt it. It's not something.
It's like a little jab back.
Michael Gove uses it, Ed Miliband uses it, and I think it is a power and authority thing. It's like, listen, Jeremy Paxman, look.
Yeah.
When you're against someone like that Jeremy Paxman tries to do it at least to everyone, and if you don't push back in that way, no, Jeremy, no, interrupt. And I think a big part of interviews, at least what it seems, is that the 7% words, is that so much of it is just the theatre of it. It's this idea versus that idea and what they're hiding. You know, it's kind of we've turned it into a bit showbiz. You know, like.
Well, it is. Look, telly.
Yeah, well, that's why.
Telly is showbiz. There is no question.
Ukrainian president and now Trump.
I know, yeah. but you know, that's the thing. Is I couldn't stress often. You cannot be boring, right? You have to be interesting. You have to use interesting words. You have to use interesting phrases. You have to have interesting ideas. You have to say it in an interesting way, right? You cannot be boring. Being boring is out. Right, so that's it. I mean, yeah. The reason I say you should do a lot of watching the TV and listening to radio is everybody does it differently. I mean, I don't teach people how to do it. What I say is that works really well. That is rubbish. Don't do it again. Okay, is that because we all, I think I'm a look person, actually. I remember when I'm debating on telly, I go, look, this is rubbish. And then I mean, and it's a way of...
It's like a deflection,
It's a way of taking the agenda to you. But once people really cotton onto it, then you have to change. Okay. Yeah. But find... Watch people, listen to either LBC or Radio 4 and see what works. Okay, what did you say?
I love LBC. Right,
well then LBC is fine. I mean, I'm a Radio 4. But it doesn't, I mean, what you want to know is what works. And what you, and don't, it's not what works politically. So it's not listening to your friends. It's actually, what is it? and what you can pick up, because everybody, you know, some people are very exuberant, some people have quiet power. Both are fine, but it has to, and what I try not to do is to make people phony. Is you have to have authenticity. I mean, that is the word at the moment. That's why Jeremy is leader of the opposition, is because he sounded more authentic than any of the people he was up against, because he just said what he believed in all the hustings. Yes, Sam.
Just in terms of like a lot of political speeches seem to be written, and I'm just wondering, are people generally there with you know, lots of pages that they're reading from, or I'm just kind of wondering like. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, so at Labour Party conference, they were they're all on the teleprompt, so you're reading it, apart from Keir Starmer's, who just had notes, right, because he doesn't like reading. But most people read, partly to make sure they get every word right, partly because the leadership likes to sign it off.
And what's your take on that? I mean,
I think it's very difficult to read a speech, and so the last person actually I was training to do a speech, he did what you shouldn't do, is he wrote it out and then read it out, and then we changed it, and then we put it into notes. And it meant that he was always trying to remember the words. The best way to do a speech is to think, what is it that I want to say? Work out your beginning. And then Winston Churchill said you should always then do your end, and then do a few notes for the middle. And then just rehearse it in your head, or this guy said he used to rehearse it running with the dog. But you can do it in the bathroom mirror. But you want to, you know, you can write down the odd phrase, but you really don't want to write down a speech.
And sort of do it more naturally.
And do it more naturally and just talk. Yeah. And actually, I mean, most politicians, apart from Labour Party, where they're really doing a speech, I mean, they have a stump speech. I mean, you know, when I saw Jeremy on Wednesday night, he did a stump speech. It wasn't suitable for the audience at all, but that was what he was doing this week, and he was just making the speech. And how we were opposed to a no-deal Brexit, which is nice.
What's a stump speech?
Well, you just do a speech that you go around the country, and you basically make the same speech, and you say, I'm in Liverpool, this is fantastic, and then you go, blah, blah, blah. Thank you, Liverpudlians, and then if you're lucky, you'll get the town right.
Is that the thing? Because like, a lot of the time they're not really saying that much. There's just a few words that they really, really want to get across.
Yep.
And because everything moves so fast, all the information moves so fast, you need to really try hard to make something stick, because it's so, you know, fluid.
Well, you brief the journalists on the paragraph that you want stuck. Yeah.
As in, like, are we kind of heading in a direction where it's mattering less and less and less, the facts and your kind of information about technology? Is it just trying to come up with a few buzzwords, getting it out? It's just PR based.
Your point about theatre is right.
Yeah,
though, the veneer is theatre, but there's loads of substance behind it, and we see the impact of substance in more subtle and nuanced ways, like in the impact of, you know, what politicians actually do.
It's hard to
the veneer is theatre.
But like, I guess in a way the theatre and the spectacle is becoming more extreme and more distracting.
Okay, well, actually, if you'd been listening to the Today programme for the last few weeks, I mean, the way they interview the prospective Conservative candidates and all the people pretending to be Boris, I mean, they are absolutely hard-nosed, and they're not having any of this veneer, right? And, I mean, I think they're not tough enough about Nasreen, Ratcliffe, because he keeps saying, well, you should blame the Iranians, and they haven't. I think somebody should say, but don't you feel sorry? Aren't you ashamed that you got it wrong? But actually, they do go, you know, but Boris, you did this, but they are doing substance. I mean, I think it's a bit of a myth, this thing, and I have to say I've heard it all my life.
Yeah. Not necessarily the journalists, but more the politicians.
No, but the journalists are going for substance. I mean, if the journalists are hard-nosed, then they have to do substance. I mean, you know, they go, but Boris, you know, there is not a transition period if we crash out without a deal. You know, you can't have both. I mean, what?
Gap 24 thing, like they're pushing them on
Yeah,
that
yeah,
a lot.
absolutely.
Yeah,
I mean,
they
they are pushing it, and I think you're wrong about there being no substance. Actually, I think Boris would like there to be no substance because I mean that's what he did at the Foreign Office. Is he'd go in to really important conferences and he'd go, everything's going to, and they'd be saying, well, Brexit's a real problem. It's a real problem.
Yeah.
He'd get everything's going to be fine.
Yeah. I'm not saying that there's no substance in the debate in general. I'm saying that when Boris speaks, the sides are already made. The people that support him.
Yeah, I know, but there's nothing we can do about that,
But
right?
what do we do then? Like, is
Well,
there
well,
nothing
well,
we can do?
I mean
Can we
that's
just
well,
go on
well
with
that's
it?
Boris, right? But you have
It's
to
also
do it.
Trump, though, it's also the right.
And it's
Loads
Trump.
of other East
No, but
European
you have to do it differently,
Yeah.
right? I mean, you have to do it differently, and you are, there is a different, there's a different bar for you, and you have to tell the truth, and you have to persuade people. And of course, you can't talk about hordes of Syrian refugees coming into Britain and the fact that Turkey's going to be let into the EU, which means I've forgotten how many million Turks are going to come into Britain, and those lies, right, is that what you have to do is you have to do it differently. You have to do it by persuasion. You have to say, we all know. I mean, things like, we all know that this is a climate emergency. The question is what we do, right? I mean, but what I have not learnt from today is where you want to take me. I have no idea. I know there's a climate emergency. I know everything's terrible. I have no idea what you want to do. And that is what you need to sort out, okay? And until you do that, actually, it's waffle,
But
right?
in my personal opinion, I think if we did say this is what it's going to be, then we'd be lying, and we would know we'd be lying, because it's almost because it could be this 70% automated technology, universal basic income. It could be a whole permutation of things depending on
What, the universal basic income is going to affect climate change?
But it's part of the solution. If part of the solution is environmental technology.
Well, if that's what you think,
automation.
honestly, it has never worked in any country. It does not help. You want
I know,
universal basic
I'm
services.
Not, but as in something along those lines, because if we want to make the transition not painful, we're going to have to make kind of efficiency gains in other areas like transportation and logistics, shipping, and so on and so on. And like environmental technologies do that.
You've just got to be much clearer. Honestly, wandering around, I mean, if you start talking about universal basic income as one of the things of dealing with climate change, you're talking politics, you're not talking climate change, right? Who do you want to talk, universal basic income is practically unknown outside the left, is a serious thing of concern. And and I know people who think it is absolute rubbish. I mean, people who've really studied it, right? That's what you don't do. What I want to know is what you're doing about climate change, right? And what you want done. And you can talk about technology, but if you say technology is the answer, you are letting everybody. That's fine, but it means I can go on driving my car.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the idea of today was very much to sort of have a framework to then actually really go into a very
What I've
coherent
tried to
strategy.
give you is a frame. What I've tried to give you is tools,
Yeah.
and I use them for everybody in every country, and they are absolutely universal. I mean, and then everybody changes. Yeah.
Yeah, can I ask something which popped into my head a couple of times, which is kind of based on the pyramid you offered at the start with objective is
Right.
at the top.
Right.
Are you kind of advocating like tactics which might kind of like undercut the ethos of your own campaign as you see it in order to appeal to the people in the middle ground?
No,
If it
no.
achieves the ultimate objective, which is
Well-
at the top of the pyramid.
Well, no. No, because I mean, you can't undercut. But what are you thinking of?
Well, actually, okay, I'm thinking of something. So I was hired to write like a bunch of pieces about endangered species, and
Right.
I kind of did some sort of market research for what was going to change people's minds and stuff. And the big one that really affected people when I was kind of like, this animal is worth this much to the local economy. Losing this insect would cost the world economy this much money, and coral reefs provide this much money in tourism and fisheries and so on.
Right.
All like economic valuations of it, but all of the conservationists that I was speaking to and doing my primary research with were saying, like, we wish this could be like beyond money kind of thing. Like, we need to stop the mindset where people think of everything in terms of its financial valuation, because this is, you know, our like world heritage,
Okay.
our cultural heritage and stuff.
Okay, so I do understand what you're saying. And I think you have to think about, I mean, that's why there are always serious debates about sorting out a strategy, sorting out tactics, and sorting out a message. I mean, and the reason they're serious debates is how pragmatic are you going to be, okay? And how much I mean, you know, that how important is the goal compared, and of course, you know, we should say we shouldn't let anything go. I mean, but it's the other thing is that, you know, we'd never let, I hope we would never let elephants be extinct, but I'm sure that there are insects being extinct every day that we just sort of shrug about. But that's, I mean, in a way, that's the debate you have to have. I mean, all I've tried to do is to go through various, you know, how the tools that people use to run campaigns, and as I say, most of them come from the Labour Party. This, actually, I made up, I devised. This is an academic thing. I mean, they're all, and I've used them for years, and they're very, very useful. But it doesn't stop. It doesn't stop incredible fights. It just says, you have to think. You know, you have to think tactically, you have to think strategically, and you have to get down. That's all I'm trying to say to you.
Thank you ever so much for
Right.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you.
I can take this. Okay. Oops.